All right, I want to welcome everyone to the panel room. My name is Jason Tonger. I'll be the moderator, and today we're going to be talking about social media. So before we start, let's go around, talk to everyone, introduce yourselves. Start with you.
Hey, I'm Jim Nettles. I am a science fiction and fantasy author as well as nonfiction author. You can find all the good stuff from me at jamespnettles.com. That'll carry you to both me's. I'm also the founder for authoressentials.net, author services and author education company.
All right, and John?
Hi, I'm John Hartness, and I'm the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books. We're an independent press based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I also write a few things. I've got several series going. You can find out all about those at falstaffbooks.com. And I am a cast member of the Authors and Dragons live play D&D podcast as well on all podcast platforms and YouTube.
All right, and last but not least, Gail?
Hi, I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail Z. Martin, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, steampunk, and more. As Morgan Bryce, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal, romance. And on the other side of my life, I've also written 6 books on social media. And one of them got named to be one of the top 20 business books to read in 2016 by Lifehack. So go figure.
All right, so to start us off, let's go to the basics. Does anyone want to discuss what social media is as it relates to writers?
A wretched hive of scum and villainy.
A way to cause a lot of trouble and occasionally make something that sounds like a salient argument.
A time sink in a black hole, but utterly necessary.
And yet I don't think we defined anything.
I mean,
they were all true statements.
Yeah, everything that was said was 100% accurate.
Okay, so to delve in a little more, why is social media important for an author?
So as the least professionally certified social media person on the panel, I'll start, because that way it can go up from here. As a writer, you aren't selling a book. You're never selling one book. You are selling yourself in every sense of the word. And social media is a way that you can reach out and present yourself to more people than you could ever possibly see in one place at one time. It allows you to broaden your reach and reach people more consistently and more frequently than you possibly could with personal appearances, bookstore signings, all of that. That's one of the beginning reasons of why social media is important for authors.
I would agree with everything that John said, and add to that, there are a lot of people that you're never going to meet in person because they live too far away, or they don't travel, or whatever the reason is. They may still love your books. Being connected on social media lets you get to know these people and truly create friendships with these readers when you're never going to be in the same geographic space. And that's really powerful because you want your readers to follow you from book to book and series to series, but most of us don't have a backlog of books already written that we can just release, bing, bing, bing. There's time in between books. There may be months. For some people, there may be more like a year or two. You want those readers who found you and liked your stuff to remember you and be connected to you when the next book comes out. So you can remind them that they liked the last one and they don't miss out on a good story that they want to read. And it's also a terrific place to stay connected to the other authors that you know. And that's where things like being invited to anthologies come from. That's where a lot of opportunities come from when you can't all sit at a bar together. Sometimes, Facebook's the next best thing.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could really add to that is it's a medium. And if you ask if it's important, the answer is yes. And the answer is it can be important in a very positive way. It can help you build your brand. It can help you build your market. It can help you reach everybody like we've just been talking about. It can also be the platform that, if you're not careful, can tank you. But I feel sure we'll talk about that as well. But I mean, if you are any kind of a business, it's not just as an author. If you're any kind of a business, digital media is where so much marketing happens these days. And it's how you reach and connect and stay connected with those customers. And because being an author is such a personal thing, when you have a relationship with any reader when they pick up your book to start with. So when they're reading your work, you're kind of in each other's heads. You know, obviously you're much more in their head than they're in yours.
Lucky.
Hopefully. Well, most of the time. Now I can't speak for John because, well, but anyway.
It's a dark, dark place in there, man.
Yeah, as your head is just sort of floating in the middle right now. Yeah, that's why the green screen is just sort of hanging in the background.
I have a note. That's what I was doing when I was looking down. I was making myself a note to add texture to my Zoom background so it would look less like I don't have shoulders.
Look, there can only be one great and powerful Oz here. It's probably not me, but you know, again, if you're looking at social media, how else can you reach audiences and stay in touch with those audiences? Because no matter what, you can never write enough to keep up with that kind of a market and demand. But it also is just a tool that lets you connect with everybody. And as we've talked about a fair amount on and off the air, it's about how well do you play with others? It's how well do you resonate with people? And if you don't have a social media presence these days, you don't exist. I mean, you don't exist to readers. You don't exist to conventions. You don't exist to markets. You just don't exist.
In some cases, you don't exist to publishers.
That's right.
Mhm. I would say in a growing number of cases, because a lot of publishers want you to come with some sort of platform already baked in, so that there are X number of people that you have been building as fans ready for your release, even for a first book, who are going to rush out there on launch day, presumably, and buy it. And that's kind of a given market for a publisher. And if you don't have anything nowadays, they're likely to pass you up for somebody who does. But the other thing I was going to say with what Jim said is that it's also that readers pretty well expect to make that kind of connection to you. And it's a whole separate debate about whether or not they should. They do. And so you need to work with that, because they don't just want your book. They want a little piece of you. They want to know who you are. They want to know where you get your ideas. They want to know what your writing style is like, and how you take your coffee, and what your schedule is. They want to feel like they know you. And if you aren't willing to give that to them and build that relationship, which is a different one than you have with people you might only see once a year at a convention. This is an everyday thing. This is an every week in and out. That's something that a lot of readers want and expect. That's part of satisfaction for them of reading.
I have people I interact with on social media multiple times a week that I may have seen in the flesh once. I made a comment today on a writers group that I think most of us are part of, that I've known this other writer for 10 years, but we've never met in actual real space. We've never laid real eyes on one another. And yet I call him a friend, he's my bud. So it is a place, I've never asked an author what their social media presence looks like. But when an author has come to me and told me what their social media presence is, and it's a big number, it is impressive. It's similar to when a publisher is looking at two books of equal quality, two houses both alike in dignity, if you're looking at two books that are both great books, you've got one slot in your production calendar. And one is by a debut author who's never sold a book, and one is by an author with 20 books on their shelf. It's highly likely you're going to take the more experienced author because you know that they're going to do the promotion and they know that what it takes. Now it's becoming very similar to if you've got two books of equal quality and one person has 20,000 Twitter followers and one person says, "What is a Twitter?" You're probably going to take the one that you don't have to educate.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially with, as an independent publisher, as a smaller press, one of the things that I consider our job is educating our authors and teaching people how to be professional published writers, because not everyone that we publish comes in with 10 years of New York level publishing experience. Matter of fact, most of the people that we publish, Gail's the exception that proves that rule. Gail and AJ Hartley.
Yeah. On David Cup.
And
Yes.
yeah.
So Jim kind of touched on it a little bit, talked about building your brand. I want to throw this out to you, Gail. Building your brand, how do you separate out the stuff they read and who you really are and who you portray in your brand?
Well, it's kind of like any other work situation. You put your best foot forward. Most of us know the more socially acceptable parts of ourselves and the less so. And we have been kind of coached since childhood or smacked up the side of the head to keep those less desirable pieces in the background. It's the same thing on social media. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, and that doesn't mean you hang everything out on the line to be seen by the neighbors. I think it's also a matter of kind of crafting how you want people to see and think of you. And that doesn't mean that it is false or manipulative. What it means is you want to occupy your own little niche in people's minds. And there's an awful lot of clutter and noise. So who are you that they have a little mental tagline to say, oh, he's the guy that writes Bubba, the Monster Hunter, funny shit, or with me, oh yeah, she's the one who really loves supernatural and a lot of her books are worlds Sam and Dean could walk right into and feel right at home. I'll take it. Because if they like one, they're going to like the other, and that is a real good shorthand way to describe at least all my urban fantasy stuff. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about is what's that little niche you can hold in somebody's mind. That's your brand, and then you want to make sure you keep reinforcing that with everything you do.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a painful thing for a lot of people today to talk about personal brand, but you hear it all the time now. I mean, that's the world we now live in. If you are in corporate America, if you are running a small business, and if you're an author, you're running a small business or hopefully not so small business. If you're indie publishing, you're running both a publishing company and a business as an author. So your brand is how people, like Gail's saying, that's how they identify with you. That's how they connect with you. That's also how they create those mental associations. So if you're going to be out there, I mean, pretty much my brand, I mean, what I put out there is pretty much me. Slightly sarcastic. And most everything I publish is the stuff that I'm doing that I think people might either benefit from or be entertained by. I don't post a whole lot of, the personal stuff that everybody has that goes on because nobody cares. But sometimes the personal stuff does matter. There's times that really does fit in because that tells people you are still really a person with a life and things happen and things go on. But it really needs to be the important things like that that you want to tell people about, because your business social media, and again, I think you have to look at it that way of your social media as an author is your business presence is different from the one that you have with your buddies on the baseball field, your friends from work, the people that know you well and that are part of your inner circle. And, you may be posting what's happening with their, with all the stuff so that you can stay in touch with friends that may not be local anymore. But it's very different from what you want to tell people about you, because we all know people that overshare on social media. And the problem there is if they're oversharing about themselves, that's on them. If they're oversharing about other people, their spouses, their kids, the other stuff that goes on, then it's not only about themselves and it's the damage they can cause themselves. It's also what they can do to other people.
I tell people that my brand is me turned up to 12 with the knob ripped off. And I feel like that's fairly accurate. I am not much different in real life as much as any of us have one, as I am
What's that word again?
life, that thing that we don't have. I'm not really much different off screen, off camera than I am in the hotel lobby bar, but I am a little. And the people that know me, they know that. There's not a whole lot of difference for a couple of reasons. One, it lets me be genuine. It lets me be real, because especially in today's world, as we're bombarded with more and more access, more and more images, more and more crafted social media and crafted public brand, people can smell bullcrap, y'all. They can pick it out a mile away. One of the things that has turned Gail from a fan who watches Supernatural into an absolute Supernatural fangirl is the sincerity of the cast and performers and creators and the fandom.
Mm-hmm.
So that is real. I believe it's very valid. I don't have kids except for my cat. So I don't have the conundrum of what do I share about my children and when do I share. I am a giant, scary looking redneck. So I don't worry as much about what do I share about where I'm going to be and that kind of thing. I'm not afraid for my physical well-being. Like, I don't feel like I have to watch out very much for that like some other authors do. Come at me, bro. But I don't share everything. I don't talk a whole lot about what's going on with my spouse. When my dad was sick, I didn't talk a whole lot about it. But like Jim said, sometimes it is really useful and helpful to let some of that honesty and some of that behind the curtain stuff out. My cat had surgery this week. I talked about it on social media because I was worried about my buddy. He's great now. That Jim had a similar event with his dog last year. People now know more about my cat's dental issues than they know about some of my characters. And
well, people care more about the dog than me, but the dog is better looking.
You said it, not me this time.
And a whole lot nicer than I am.
Low bar.
All right. I wanted to. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've probably shared more personal information, background, history, insights, but that was a calculated, definite decision. And it was a decision I made because I felt that I knew from talking to a number of people that I wasn't the only person who had dealt with some of those issues. And I felt like I could make a positive difference by going on the record and talking about them. And this goes back to the whole Hold On to the Light, blog campaign that we did. The idea that when somebody that you know who, whether it's an author that you follow or an actor or, somebody else stands up and says, hey, I've had these problems and I've struggled with this and I've dealt with it and come out the other side. And if you're struggling with this, I believe in you, you can come out of it too. That's powerful. And I don't have a big voice, but what voice I have, if I can share something like that, that makes a difference for somebody and helps them, then that teeny tiny bit of fame that I have is put to good use. So it's not indiscriminate sharing. It's not, hey, I'm having a bad day, I'm gonna pop off and vent here. Those times that I have spoken so personally, it's been very intentional and planned and crafted, and it's been for a good purpose. As far as kids go, the whole time my kids were younger, I kept referring to them as high school son or college daughter. And finally, when my oldest got married and moved to New York City, I figured that if she could move to New York City, I could probably say her name on Facebook. That would probably be okay. And the other two finally came to me and said, Mom, we're adults. For God's sake, would you just use our names? I'm really tired of, college son. So fine. I say very, very little about them. Usually in the context of, hey, we were here on vacation, because they have their lives and I don't want to screw anything up for them. But it's definitely a different thing when your kids are adults than when they're little.
And one of the other things I'd add to build on top of what Gail was saying, Hold On to the Light is a lot about authors and fans supporting people that need it in the community. And one of those things that is sometimes a delicate line to walk on is the one where somebody needs help. And sometimes, and like I say, too often I see this where somebody will respond and turn something in someone else's crisis into an about them situation. That's not the right thing to do. If you want to help somebody, you want to support somebody, if you want to say something publicly, you can state something supportive. And then if you want to offer help to somebody, take it offline.
Mm-hmm.
Ping them a message. If you need to talk, I'm here. I do it all the time. And you can post things of support online. You can say, when this happened to me, this is how I dealt with it. But you want to be very cautious about how and what you present, because again, if somebody else is having a difficult time, there's ways to be supportive and there's ways not to. I guess that's the best way to put that.
It's not a competition.
No.
All right. This kind of leads into that a little bit, because we are all at this point dealing with a crisis. World.
What, you guys are on deadline too?
Yeah, I got 2 things due the end of this month.
So do I. I mean,
I just have to write another 18,500 words in the next 9 days.
So you'll have that done before midnight.
Yeah, before midnight some night.
So
I didn't give you the qualifier.
In a crisis situation such as we're dealing with right now, has that changed how you deal with social media? Gail kind of touched on it a little bit, but in another aspect, by the way, this came from one of our people in the Continual Facebook page was asking this question, Michael Williams. In addition to, has it changed your social media? Have you tried new things in social media because stuck at home?
Absolutely. If you're in the Continual group, that's one of the new things that we're trying right now. I built that originally before breakfast on vacation. because I realized we weren't going to get out. And then I, you know, pulled John and Jim and some other folks in and said, hey, I did this thing. You want to come play?
Not the first time that one of us has done that to the other, by the way.
Oh, no. We do that to each other all the time. I'm in the alligators up to hip deep. You want to come swimming? The water's fine.
How cold's that water? Oh, wait, too late.
Yeah. So continual is certainly one of those things. I've been doing a lot more video. Not that I didn't know that I needed to do more video, but I'm finally getting around to doing all those video readings and video introductions and video panels, and Facebook watch parties and Netflix watch parties, and dropping into my reader groups with a little video once a week, just to be a little more personal and check in on everybody and have a conversation. So yeah, definitely switching things up because it's a new normal.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone from probably 2 pieces of content a week on the Falstaff YouTube channel to fresh content every Monday through Friday. Every day of the work week, we're producing new content now. So very much we're trying new things. And the interesting thing for Gail and I is that this isn't really that huge a change in the way we live our lives, because we already were full-time writers and worked from home. We aren't. The difference is we're not going to conventions every couple of weekends, but it has, for me, spurred some new thinking, and the desire for greater communication has led similarly to an uptick in our video content creation, because looking at somebody face to face, I feel like it's incredibly valuable. That's why we present it over 24 conventions in a normal year. Well, who knows how many that will be moving forward, because we don't know how many conventions will survive this. There's a bunch that won't. So we as a publisher, I'm not using the royal we need to be able to have that same level of presentation, if not greater. And now that everybody is a content creator, because Zoom's free, YouTube accounts are free, everybody can do it. So the fact that Continual is one of the first broad-based online convention platforms, and Falstaff is one of the first publishers to really start pushing our publishing company YouTube channel, that puts us in a stronger position because we're staking out our territory early.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, because I mean, I do continuity work. I still do a lot of technology consulting work, business consulting work. And so for me, I actually am pretty heavily involved in a lot of what's going on that way. But it's also been, I've got a number of new clients that have come in the door because for a variety of reasons, but a couple of clients who've come, one of whom we're actually trying to figure out how to build a full social media presence for them. They're an established author, but they have no social media presence. They haven't had one. We've got to work on what's the identity they want to present. And I've got a couple of other people we've been talking about trying to change what they present so that they can be much more of who they're wanting to become. Because if you're in this world, and I think that the current situation is one that is allowing people to be reflective and look at themselves and look at who are they, who do they present. I think that the current situation is also because we see a lot of people who are coming out and really stressed with the situation, which is, of course, legit. I mean, everybody is very stressed with it. We're seeing how people are handling that stress and watching the people that are being supportive of that and watching people start to form things like Continual that are strengthening networks and bonds that were already there, I think is probably one of the biggest benefits we've seen come out of this. But I really believe, and I've been saying for a number of years, the people who are doing video, the people who are talking, who are present, who are out there, are going to be the ones that have a lasting reputation. I mean, we've been talking about wanting to do something like this for several years, been doing video, but I've actually spent more of my time producing video for other people in video content. So it's been a bit of the whole physician heal thyself and getting to my own work. So, I mean, for me, it's actually more about actually getting to execute that part of the plan that I've had for several years and been working towards. But it's one of those things that everybody has now an opportunity to establish that. And the question is how many people stick with it, because it's work.
It's definitely work. And whether you're creating video or not, being on Facebook as an ongoing commitment every day and feeding your group new content and finding that content, whether you produce it or whether you go out and hunt it down on social media and pull things in that are relevant. Sometimes you're lucky enough to run into that stuff by chance, but most of the time you have to go looking for it and pull it in and contextualize it. And I think that that's definitely something you have to factor into your work schedule, because my mornings are generally spent doing my email, doing some administrative stuff, and doing my social media. And that's a couple hours of work a day, not counting recording panels, recording interviews, things like that, on top of the same amount of time I need to be spending writing the books, which is how I make my living. So that's, definitely something you have to factor in. It's a commitment, and it does take time. And there are only so many hours in a day, so you have to figure out what you can do and where you can put that emphasis to get the most bang for the buck.
And a lot of what we're talking about and a lot of what we're saying comes off as very, very calculating, very calculated. And that's because, like Jim said, you are running a business. We are running businesses. Some of us may not have other people that rely on us for their livelihood as well. But whether you do or not, you are the business. So you've got to make some of these decisions. I think probably the biggest surprise to me when I decided to write full time was how little time I actually spend writing. The amount of writing time I do in a day hasn't changed. The amount of YouTube editing I do has definitely skyrocketed.
So this kind of leads into another question we had from Samantha Dunaway Bryant. How do you keep yourself from being sucked into social media all day and keep the time to write?
I work. I mean, for me, it's there's stuff to be done. Me getting on social media is, I skip on and off during the day, and I surf through, and it looks like I spend much more time on there than I actually do. Pretty much for me though, there's work to be done. There's conference calls to be had. There's clients to be talked to. There's writing to be done. And I tend to be popping in and out every, couple of hours. I'll pop in for 5 minutes, scroll through, hit the updates. There's a couple of tools I use that make life easier. But right now, to not get sucked into it for me is the same thing I do anytime I get stressed. I work, because I usually stay about 100, 110% of capacity. And that's what I plan to. And that, and then on top of that, you pile just all the other stuff that happens, calls that come in, stuff that goes wrong. So yeah, I don't really allow myself the time to get sucked in any more than I can help.
I did a video this week about transitioning to being a full-time writer, and it's whether or not you made that transition by choice. And it also goes for situations like this, when all of a sudden you're used to being out of the house 10 hours a day or more, and suddenly you're not. First, you have to analyze your work patterns. That's a big thing. Are you a schedule-driven person, or are you goal-driven? I'm goal-oriented. I have a thing that needs to be done by a time. It doesn't matter if I'm writing at 1 in the morning or 8 in the morning, as long as I'm getting words done. One of my former employers was very schedule-oriented. This led to a fair chunk of conflict because I wanted to work 4 days a week. He wanted me to show up on time. We eventually came to a mutual understanding that I wouldn't work there anymore. But for me, that's how I can avoid getting sucked in. When I sit down to write, I turn off I turn off anything that makes a notification on my desktop, and I tell Alexa to shuffle a playlist of songs that I think will work for the scene or chapter or chapters that I need to work on at that point. And then I just get down to it.
I know my writing patterns, and I may go on a tear for several pages, and then it's kind of like when you have your fist clenched too long, you have to let go and let the muscle relax a little bit. And it's sort of like I have to jump out of the page for a couple of minutes to check my mail, to check Facebook, to check the news. And then I can go back and write again, and I can tighten that brain muscle again until it clenches and I have to go take another little break. At least that's the way I picture it. So I jump on and off all day. But like John said, at the end of the day or at the end of the week, I've got a thing to turn in. It's due. So I can make it easy on myself by really limiting those jump out times. I can make it hard on myself by not paying attention and then being up to all hours. Personally, I kind of prefer doing it the easy way. So that makes it pretty easy to write hard on myself most of the time.
Yeah, I have attention deficit disorder. So I have learned, and I was in my 40s before I was ever diagnosed with that. So I had developed all these workarounds before I had anyone tell me, hey, you should figure out, here's ways that we can help you deal with this brain issue that you've had your entire life. I was like, thanks. But anyway, one of the things that I understand is that I can only focus on one detail-oriented task for about 45 minutes to an hour. So for me, that's about 1,000 to 1,500 words. So I write 1,000 words and take a break. I write 1,000 words and take a break. That way I can break it up into chunks, and it works with the way my brain works. And Lord knows there's plenty of other things that I can jump onto to do. There are always royalty statements to be prepared. There's always stuff to edit, video to edit. So I put that kind of constraint on myself for social media as well, because social media is perfect for the ADD brain because it is so fast moving and jumpy roundy. So it's easy to spend hours doing that because the other part of ADD is hyper focus. So
and I think
I've trained myself to deal with it that way.
And I think the important thing that out of this was we all have different ways, different approaches. And one of the things that for me, so as John knows, because I came down with the flu right after the last real convention we did, and I'm still trying to finish getting rid of bronchitis. That I wiped out pretty much the entire month of March for this because it wiped me out. And so I'm still trying to recover from deadlines that all stretched because of that. And as I hack up along, but even so, we have to find those things that work for us. And I mean, that's probably the most important thing out of this is we all have different tools and techniques on what works for us. But right now, based on this, there's a certain degree where things that normally we wouldn't bother any of us are really going to bother us, not necessarily because it's even directly on us, but we see so many people we know, we care about also being affected. So it's how do we make sure we're taking care of ourselves so that we can then take care of others? And so sometimes that means, guess what? You're just going to have to stop. You may not get the words done today, and that's fine. That means you need to you need to make up for them if you've got deadlines coming. But occasionally you've got to figure it out. But we're now past that point. We're several weeks in. We're kind of past that initial trauma point, because that's really what it's been, to where we should be adapting to where this is a temporary normal. Now, it changes every day. There's all sorts of chaos going on. But at some point, you have to look and say, okay, this has become part of my new normal for now. I can't wait for it to get back to normal. How do I incorporate this into what I'm doing? And I mean, again, this kind of goes back to that knowing who you are, that piece of self-reflection, that piece of, of whatever it is you need to do. I do a lot of meditation. I developed that habit a very long time ago. It's something that kept me sane for traveling for 20 years, airports, hotels, all sorts of strange things that go on. That's one of those things that works for me. It's finding that tool set that lets you take in the knowledge you need to have and cut out a lot of the extraneous noise that makes up social media.
And I think it also, just like we were talking about, how you have to understand how you focus, how your brain works, how you pull words on page. I think another thing is there are so many different social media platforms and tools that you need to look and see where your audience is, because it does no good to build a presence in some place where they aren't. But allowing for that, look at the different platforms and decide which ones you enjoy doing or at least don't hate doing, because consistency is a huge part of this. And don't feel pressured to be on platforms that you're uncomfortable with, or at least put them off until later when you have built up that confidence and that following so that it no longer seems so intimidating, or you're ready to learn that new skill. So I think that that's a big thing. People feel like they have to be everywhere all at once, and you don't. I usually tell people to pick two that you're comfortable with and get consistent there and draw following and figure out what you want to talk about. And you can always expand to more. And I think that's really important, because some people look at certain platforms and go, oh, that's just totally not me. Well, that's okay. Pick another one.
That's me and Instagram. I've never been a picture guy. I don't take pictures at it's just not been my thing. So I don't do Instagram. I'm useless at it, and I can never stay consistent. Just like Gail was saying, it's so important, that kind of consistency. Now, in a crisis situation, in an unfamiliar time, when you're trying to figure out how to adapt, find some tools to help. We have a set of auto-generated Twitter posts. Gail, I think you still do the same thing.
Yeah.
We have pre-generated tweets that when I'm overwhelmed and don't have the bandwidth to engage on Twitter, I just let those run, and the name is still out there. The books are still getting represented. So Hootsuite, TweetDeck, ReaderLinks actually also does it. That's what we use now, is ReaderLinks.
Later.
Who?
Later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of these tools will help you set up some programmed content. And yes, social media is always better when you're making a real, sincere, direct connection. But if junk mail didn't work, people wouldn't send it out so much. So pre-programmed tweets do have value. It's not as good as you being out there and being yourself and being funny, snarky, sweet, whatever. But when you're overwhelmed, it's something.
And you can still respond back to the comments from your audience on
Absolutely.
those.
Absolutely.
It's just I probably don't get to look at my Twitter feed until 11:30 at night, at which point I do my likes and my retweets and I answer any questions and I jump on anything somebody's tagged me on. But that gets pushed to the end of my day. Facebook, I'm on. If I don't get out and put kind of my baseline set of posts of certain cute fuzzy animals and funny things in the morning, then I jump back and forth in and out throughout the day. But I've got in my head a certain amount of posts I need to do on my profile, in both of my reader groups, in the Supernatural fan group that I run, in the Hold On to the Light group. And I try to make that a very consistent presence. And like John said, I'm getting my feet under me for Instagram. I've gotten better at it than I was. I still have a long way to go, but I'm starting to find a way to build that in. And yeah, it's absolutely okay to have those automated posts provide that baseline so you never just disappear when you're busy. And then you can jump out and augment that whenever you have time.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes you find out a platform is just not working for you. Or sometimes you just need to walk away from a platform for a while. I mean, for me, I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter. I've got multiple accounts. My author account, I'm trying to get back in the habit of using because there were too many fights going on that were not productive and time sucks. So now I have a couple of other accounts that I use that are targeted for very specific purposes. That track certain things happening in the industry, that track certain people going on in the industry. What are they putting? What are they publishing? And that's actually one of the ways I get some of the content we use is by following Reddit. There's a lot of ways you can get the content you can share that would be good for your audience. But the other thing is right now, again, it's one of those things of look right now at, is it time to be more of a creator than it is a consumer? And I think that's the big thing when we talk about how do you not get sucked in. It's better if you're actually spending the time creating new things that you think will be beneficial or entertaining to your audience or informative than it is to spend the time looking to see how many people, who's in the hospital, whose cat's sick, because right now the majority of the content we see going by is people that are going through and suffering from some degree of stress. So anything that we can do that gives benefit in those times is something that helps remind people we're here. And one of the things that artists and content creators do is we give people entertainment. We give people education. And if we're giving little pieces of that on social media now, then when people pick up our books, that's something they remember then too and associate with us. And I'm not saying that from a calculated maneuver. I'm saying that is people want to connect with people. That's why social media exists. And so you don't have to have this beautifully polished commercial presence. And I think that's one of those things everybody gets really hung up on, including me, is because John's going to laugh at this. It's that saying, and I'm going to quote Picard because I've been watching the show a little bit. Perfection is the enemy of the good. Right now, we need to be cranking out the good. A la when you see the intros and outros for this show, just sort of forgive that.
I promise I won't give you any crap because I make the intros and outros for the Falstaff YouTube channel. So you're off the hook there, pal. I completely agree with Jim. And I've built a career off of an unpolished presentation and brand. Unpolished is kind of my brand, and that's because I'm generally very lazy. So honesty is just easier because I don't have to remember anything. And man, does Jonathan Frakes not look like Vincent D'Onofrio's older Amish brother on that show? I saw a still today and I was like, when's Vincent? Oh, wait, that's Riker. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like you ate the dude from the cell.
I'm not sure if my sister's still lusting after him or not. I
Which
thought a
one?
Dragon Frakes. I
Okay.
thought one year when she heard he was coming for Dragon, we were going to have to like raise bail money.
I mean, he's a pretty big old grizzly bear, but man, yeah, he ain't 30 anymore. Who among us is?
Yeah, but this may grow into be that. So I'm
Look, there's a reason that I've trimmed down and I'm keeping the goatee behind the pop filter because this is still mostly brown. This, much more contrasty.
yeah, this has been going white for a long time.
Mine started in the very center and spread out and is now creeping up. It used to be at my old job that when I would come into work and point and name them. I was like, this one's yours. There's a new one and it's you. Now there are too many.
That's because you have authors.
You're right. Each author is worth like 50.
So, John, you were saying that you're honest because, it's easier. But Vicky Perry was asking to do your social media as an author, and I figured this is perfect for you. Do you have to tone yourself down, or can you just let your flag fly?
So everyone else on this panel is surprised that I haven't dropped an F-bomb yet. I don't censor myself. Now, I pick my places and I pick my battles. I don't allow politics in my Facebook group, and I don't post any political or religious posts on my author wall. But if you're on my personal wall, then all bets are off. You're in my living room and you're going to get full unexpurgated Harkness. If you catch me in a bar and you ask me a question, I'm going to give you an honest answer. I do feel like there is some risk if you are, like myself, extreme on one end of the political spectrum or the other, and I'm pretty liberal, way on the end, way on that end. There is risk in putting that and putting those viewpoints out there on social media because there's a subset of the population that exists solely to hunt down people who are on the opposite end of the spectrum from them and cause them trouble. So it's not that I'm being disingenuous, but I feel like I am just saving myself time and bandwidth because there are people who exist only to troll. I mean, there are people who exist only to troll Chuck Wendig and John Scalzi. That's the only reason they have social media, is to troll those authors. And I don't have time in my life for that. So I don't necessarily jump into the fray. Now, I'm friends with Vicky, and I know that some of the things that I know she's had some issues with people coming at her on social media because of some of her views. And that's going to happen. I've had it. But you can mitigate it some ways by choosing where you are political or controversial. If you're going to put forth an opinion that 40 to 50% of your viewership is going to disagree with strongly, then maybe you only put that on your personal page. It's kind of like talking about your kids when they're little. Keep that stuff for the personal. Now, art is inherently political. So if you think that you're not being political, you're being political. You're just either being unintentionally political, or you're oblivious to the political nature of your own existence. So a lot of times I think you can get my views on every issue by reading my work. And then not only do you find out where I stand on things, I get paid. So
yeah, I agree with John. There are so many things, especially right now, that I have opinions on. But I also realize that that's not the center of my job. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a political commentator. But I pick my topics by the things that I just can't not say something about, because I want to still be true to my own self and true to my own values. But I only say those things on my profile. Now, my profile has always been an intentionally public space. I never had the extended family issue to try to, oh, well, I only talk to extended family on my personal page. My personal page was never really personal, but that's where you get more of me. There's never any politics or any of those views in my reader groups. And, in an attempt to keep everybody happy and friendly on the Supernatural fan group, we don't ever discuss any shipping. That just kind of keeps the peace. So I make those distinctions. I don't talk about nearly all the things that I have opinions on or swear over at the breakfast table when I'm reading the news, because why bother? There are a lot of other people out there saying more cogent things, and I try not to say something unless I feel like I can really add an insight to the conversation that I haven't seen 10 other places. I also agree with John that if you read my work, you're going to know where I come from, and I'm also very liberal. If you think that books can be non-political, and I've seen people say, why do you have to keep bringing politics into your fiction? Well, assuming that the status quo will always continue the way it is a political statement. That the same people who are in power now will always be in power, and that the same people who are out of power now will never be empowered. That's highly political. It may be the status quo, and you might not think of that as a political sentiment, but to the people who are currently cut out of the power, it definitely is. So you've made a political statement by thinking that you're not making one. And I think that goes back to what John was saying about people who aren't aware of their own political standpoint. So yeah, you're going to see what my standpoint is. As Morgan Bryce, I write male paranormal romance. I have a number of LGBTQ secondary characters in my Gale stuff. I'm going to take a strong stand in support of and in defense of my characters and my readers. So there's some things that just aren't tolerated. You come on my page talking crap, you're gone. But in the interests of time, and to keep myself from getting distracted, I don't argue with trolls. I block and delete and they're gone. And that is a wonderful thing that I wish you could do much more easily in real life. Just, you're gone. I don't have to deal with you anymore. Not even going to
It's still easy in real life. It's just not legal.
This is true. This is true.
Remember, it's easier to get rid of the bodies on paper than it is in the swamp. But
And
you
it's
can do
really
it both.
bad if you lose count of the bodies in real life. Larry won't be able to fix that with a note in the margins.
This is true.
But and I actually have done time and still do some time in media. I've covered both sides of it. And I typically do not dive into anything that's going to be incendiary unless it's something I see that I absolutely can't let go of, or somebody is saying or doing something that is going to hurt something other than themselves. If somebody's doing something that's going to get them a Darwin Award, the only thing I'm going to do is ask for them to put it on video. But if you're doing something that is injurious to someone else, especially if it's somebody who is not defending themselves, who's allowing themselves to be trolled, who's, and especially upon occasion when somebody wants to come after me, I'll play with my food before I eat it, but I will be merciless if I want to spend the time. But if it's a waste of my time and there's no benefit, block and go away. I'm not going to spend time arguing about something that is not going to be beneficial to the discussion. If I can't add something positive or I can't stop something that is severely detrimental, then there's not really a whole lot of benefit to me getting into it. And as John and Gail both know, I also have other limitations on what I can and can't say in social media. But even if I didn't have those, my approach would not be that different. There's a few other arguments and fights I'd go pick. But I mean, like say, piracy is a hot one for me. And so is somebody who's just being a complete and total. If somebody is bilking people for money, much like the scumbag that's in Louisiana, who is dragging all of his people to his church and a bunch of them are already getting sick, I'm going to call that out.
That should be criminal behavior.
And I mean, if his first thing is to say, now that you have your stimulus checks, bring it to me, that should be criminal behavior. I mean, if I see certain things like that, I can't help but call something out.
I think it also depends on how you call it out, because I know I have readers and friends who I disagree with, and they know it and I know it, and that's okay. But I try very hard when I do take a stand on something not to get into name calling or being extremely sarcastic. I try to set out a rational argument, sometimes with footnoted sources, where I'm laying this out logically and dispassionately, even if it's something I feel strongly about. And I think that makes a difference, because you're not name calling, you're not crap talking or trash talking, you're stating an opinion, and you're not belittling other people in the process. And I'll even put a little warning on top that says, look, guys, you know my politics. If we don't agree, just save us both some time and keep on scrolling. You're not going to like what I've got to say. And that works. The folks that are somewhere else on issues have generally now decided to just go their merry way, because we are going to agree to disagree, and it's just not worth fighting about.
Yeah, I instituted a rule on my wall. If you want to come in and disagree with anything I post, feel free. But you may not disagree with something someone else posts. Because I do have friends and family who I disagree with on issues that are important to me. And you don't know who my first cousin is. And this may be a human being that I love dearly. They're just brutally stupid on this one issue. They may be brutally stupid on other issues, and I still love them dearly. And I get to call them stupid because they're my cousin. You don't.
That's where bless your heart comes in.
Yeah. So the way I handle that kind of interaction is when a thread starts to get heated on my social media and people start to go back and forth, because I find that most of the time the first comment is fairly calm in its disagreement. And then somebody piles on, and then somebody else piles on. By stopping that reaction, so if Gail says something on my wall that Jim thinks is ridiculous, Jim knows he ain't allowed to say anything about it on my wall. He can go to his wall and say whatever he wants. That's his living room. And the way I defuse the tension of saying, shut your cake hole, is I say, this is my wall. It has to all be about me. Me, me, me. And then if it continues, I just delete the post. I delete a fair number of posts. So but that's a standing rule. You can argue with me all you want, but you're not allowed to argue with other people.
And sometimes there are people that I will hide their comment because I have a relationship with them. I don't want to delete them, but I also don't want other people piling on and ripping them to shreds. So I'll just hide the comment. There, they've said it. I'm the only person who sees it. Nobody else is going to be bothered by it, and I don't have to keep coming back and cleaning up a mess.
Yep. And now, another thing, I'm sorry, Jim, just to add real quick, if you're doing Facebook advertising and people say, I do Facebook advertising. If someone makes a comment on my Quincy Harker ad that I'm paying for, that is negative toward the book or negative toward me or negative towards another author's book that says, oh, this is so much better than that, I hide those comments on my ads. I don't delete them. Because if I hide the comment, the person that left it can still see it and I can still see it. That way they don't know that it's hidden, and I don't have to put up with them commenting again and again, getting more and more irate that I'm deleting their comment. So it cuts the legs out from under a potential troll that way.
Mm-hmm. And I found that a lot of people who are trolls are in it for the fight. They're in it for the excitement. If you just block and delete them without any engagement, it's not fun. They'll go somewhere else because they're not getting a rise out of you. They're not getting a platform. You've kicked the soapbox out from under them. If you just see it and block and delete it right there, they'll go pick on somebody else.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going to go, is that a lot of this game is about, can I stir up and muckrake on somebody else's platform and start a conversation there? Because if I can pick a fight there, I can, there's that perception of, oh, well, I picked a fight on so-and-so's wall. Or, people who frequently don't even realize consciously necessarily what they're doing, but a lot of them do. That if they come on and they start a mess in somebody else's group and fight so that they then have to go firefight, they go feel, better about themselves. That kind of behavior, that kind of destructive behavior is one of those things that if you get sucked into it, you're going to spend all your time trying to clean up the mess. You're not going to get your writing done, and people are going to start to see the worst out of you, and because it's going to bring out the worst out of you. It's going to stress you out. You're going to waste your time. And at the end of the day, you never win with a troll.
Mm-hmm.
The drama itself is the reward.
Mark Twain said it 150 years ago or whatever. Never argue with an idiot. They'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. I already take a pill every morning for my blood pressure because of my dietary choices. I don't need to do anything on social media to drive it up even higher. I had a telemedicine appointment with my doc this morning, and when I got on, I told her, I said, so I checked my blood pressure this morning. I'm not going to tell you what it was because I'd been reading the news for an hour before I checked it. So we're just not ever going to do that again.
Yeah, and I find also if I allow an argument to continue on a page, on a post, I keep feeling like I need to go back and check it. I want to see what somebody's reaction was. I want to make sure that nobody is behaving badly. And now I've got this massive distraction. And that also helps me weed out, do I care enough about making a post on this topic to deal with the distraction? Do I think I have something important enough to say, at least to a small group of people, that is worth losing that focus? And that helps me, you know, cut through a lot of choices.
All right. So shifting gears just a little bit, social media has changed a lot since it started up. Is there a way, or what ways do you use to, I guess, future-proof your presence as much as you can?
I'm going to give you a quick and easy answer. You really can't. I mean, if you're talking about future proofing, you're trying to predict way too many unpredictable things. If you want to do future proofing, it is own as much of your own real estate as you can. So that means getting people onto your mailing list or things like that, so you have a way to communicate with them, and use social media. If you're tied to a single platform, then you have a single point of failure. But go to the platforms that you resonate with, that your readers resonate with. You can connect with those people, or just the people you want to network with. And not everything you do has to be tied to your brand and your business, but everything you do everything you post or do publicly, you should have your brand and your business in mind. And I think that's kind of a different distinction. So you can be you. You should be you. I mean, everything that I do out there pretty much is me in some twisted, sickened way. But if you're wanting to do future proofing, then you need to call Dr. Who, bring in a TARDIS. Let's jump forward and take a look what it's going to be in 12 months, 24, 36. See who's built what spy network to use now to gather your information to market to you, and then start building on that platform early and figure out which ones are going to fail and which ones are going to succeed. So other than that,
I think it's also about posting cross-platform. So if I do a video and I upload it on YouTube and I upload it on Facebook and I put a link to it in my newsletter, now if any one of those goes away, it's in several places. And the other thing is, so much of the content that we're talking about here is fairly time limited. We're not putting stuff out on social media that is there for the ages. We're reacting to things that are in the news. We're reacting to what the weather was like today. We're talking about a book that is only new right now. It's not new 3 years from now. So there's an awful lot of stuff that really isn't worth having an archaeologist dig up 3,000 years from now. They'll be amazed at all the cat pictures. But
it's also important to, the only kind of future proofing I try to do is I scrub my tweets. I don't need anybody going back and digging up anything I tweeted in a moment of anger from 2010 about an old job before I had published a lick of fiction. I don't need that coming out, so I have a tweet scrubber set up on my account to delete anything that's over 6 months old.
And see, I don't use Twitter that way. I almost never, very, very rarely tweet anything or retweet anything political. I don't get in fights on Twitter. Let's be honest, I mostly tweet pictures of Winchesters and book launches. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. It's books and Sam and Dean, pretty much all. Not a whole lot to scrub.
No. And I don't really get into fights on Twitter today. But we've seen way too many times somebody get dragged for something they said in or out of context that they do or don't still believe 5, 10, 20 years ago. So it's an easy thing for me to have set up that if it's more than 6 months old, it just doesn't exist. And I really could take it down now because I behave differently on social media than I did 10 years ago. But I may feel the same way in 10 years that my social media presentation at 56, 7, 6 will be different than it is at 46. Sorry, math is
Well-
not my friend. Also, I forgot what month it is.
Yeah,
So I
well,
couldn't remember how old I am.
and like I say, the only thing I'll add there, and this is again a difference to platform, is some things will have longer legs and longer value. A book reading is good today or 10 years from now. You may have, some of the content we plan to do with Continual will have evergreen value.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it won't. But, so depending on where it's at and where it's posted, depending on the platform you're on and what you're intending to do with the content, if you're a musician, if you're an artist, the art you created 10 years ago still has value. You may have a different style, you may have a different sound, but that art still has value. The same thing with art with books. So it's depending on what's the content you're putting together that you're putting out there and what do you intend to do with it. So future proofing yourself may just as much about identifying that content that you want to keep that will have legs and making sure that as new platforms come up, you've got a way to bring it back up if it still makes sense.
Jim, what you're saying is exactly the reason that our YouTube show Book Babble is focused the way it is. In Book Babble, which is a YouTube show that Melissa MacArthur and I do on the Falstaff channel, it drops every Thursday. And we'll have to start recording new content here pretty soon because the conventions we were going to record new content at didn't happen. But on Book Babble, we bring other professional authors on. And most of the time when authors are talking about, it's either a panel like this where you're talking about a topic or you're out talking about your current release. We specifically structured Book Babble to talk about your favorite book and a book that has influenced you somehow. It's not designed to talk about your work, but it presents the author as a person and a reader and a lover of literature. And that is that kind of timeless, evergreen content. We also put up a lot of readings. I've got readings of Gail on our YouTube channel from 2000, I think 18, 19, and 20 now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that kind of evergreen content. I mean, hell, there's video up there of me reading poetry from 2012.
So I mean,
Right.
I'm wearing
Yeah,
a funky hat.
so I mean, again, it's just about what's the content, because I mean, tweeting about my cat today is not necessarily, of course I don't have a cat, or if I do have a cat, then we really have a problem. But
Yeah, I was going to ask.
I've been spending too much time with you and your cat.
There's no such thing as spending too much time with my cat. My cat's awesome. He's I got to start calling him Snag though, because they removed one of his canines. So now he's not a three-toed sloth. He's a three-toothed sloth cat. I hope he's upstairs and can't hear me mocking him on the internet because he'll poop in my shoe.
That's why my
Okay,
boy is sweeter than your cat.
It's a low bar too.
So, for an unpublished author such as myself,
Mhm.
when should you get on social media? And what's one tip you guys would each suggest to have someone go out and do today?
I think that you want to be on social media now, regardless of when your book comes out, because that whole thing about building a platform of people who are excited for you and cheering for you and who kind of feel invested in your success because they've been with you since the beginning and they've cheered you on. those are going to be the first people who, when you finally publish, want to run out and buy the book to support you. So you want to gather them to you. And they may, for starters, be your friends and your family and some people you know from con. That's great. You got to start somewhere. But if there's something else you're passionate about, whether it has a direct tie to what you write about or not, certainly if there is some kind of tie, it's better, but some reason to keep going out there and talking about something. That also helps collect those people who are likely to be interested in what your books are about when your books finally come out. And now you've already got them gathered when the book comes out. You don't have to start then to go look for them. You've got a benefit right out of the gate. It's a lot more time consuming if you bring the book out and then have to go gather people to your crowd. They could have been cheering you from the starting line. Now they're only cheering you from halfway through the race. So now, but find other things you can talk about until you actually have the book.
What Gail's describing is the exact strategy that Tammy Labrecque puts forth in her really excellent book called Newsletter Ninja. Give before you ask.
Mm-hmm.
So get out there and share every post by an author you've met. Retweet every tweet by an author you've met. Talk about what you're reading that you love. Talk about, I started doing 5-minute book reviews every Friday. None of them have yet come in under 7 minutes. Surprising no one at all. But it puts me out there as a reader and talks about books I love. And a lot of those people who are seeing those reviews aren't fans of mine or even people subscribed to the channel. One of the biggest things driving search traffic to my YouTube channel right now is my review of Harley Merlin and the Secret Coven by, I forget the author, maybe Bella Forrest. But people are searching for that book and they're finding my review and it's driving people to see me. So be out there, be visible, be sincere and supportive.
Well, and I mean, I think you're going to hear the same thing here. The best time to start your social media presence is when the platform launched. The second best time to start your social media presence is right now, not while you're watching and listening to us. Wait till we get through this video and then the next one after this and maybe one or two more. But by then you'll be equipped to start your social media presence. But again, this goes back to, it's not important about, you're not starting your social media presence because it's come by my book. You're starting your social media presence to tell people you exist. You're using your social media presence to tell people who you are, connect with people. And some of those people will be readers. Some of those people will be writers that you can build a network with, support, like John's saying, tweet out when they have a book launch, read them, leave a book review, because this whole game is about authors supporting authors and authors supporting readers, because readers want to see people that play fair together mostly. Mm-hmm. There are some who don't, but if you are spending that time to build the network of people that you all trust each other, you know each other, and you've been supporting each other all along, when you finally get to that point and you get something out the door, guess what? You have some people who can and will help support you when yours comes out the door. Instead of waiting until you have a book in hand to try to build a network with people. I mean, you're here being tormented by us. So if you weren't out working on your network and building that a while back and didn't, run us down and say, hey, hi, I'm Jason, where would you be doing?
And if there's one piece of actionable advice, own your name on all platforms and your domain name. There's a Dr. John Hartness that lives about an hour from here who is frequently annoyed that I planted my flag early for pretty much all iterations of my name on all social media platforms, URLs, and email addresses. And yeah, sometimes I do get email directed at him, and I'm like, yeah, I don't actually know that guy's email because it's not that John Hartness at this. That obviously goes out the window if you intend to write under a pseudonym and don't know what that pseudonym will be. Gail 10 years ago couldn't have registered morganbryce.com.
No, but I did get it. Now, the reason that everything is Gail Z. Martin is because, A, there are a ton of Gail Martins in the world, but more specifically, there is another Gail Martin who writes inspirational fiction. And as I explain to people, she writes about Jesus, I write about vampires. It would not be good for our audiences to become confused.
I mean, they both rose from the dead.
Yeah, well, you know, there is that intersection. But she already had Gail Martin, so I'm Gail Z. Martin, and that's okay.
Faith Hunter. Her website is faithhunter.net because there's a yoga instructor whose real name is Faith Hunter, and she owns faithhunter.com for her yoga studio, I think it is. And that's why Faith's website is a .net.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it took me, I owned James Nettles, jamespnettles.com, and a couple of the other iterations of it, starting back in the 90s. And I wasn't doing anything with them at that point in time. And somehow or another, I let them lapse. And then when I was, yeah, exactly. That's the reason it took a number of years for me to get my name back. And so it's definitely important. And I mean, so talking about Alexander Gideon that just produced a book this week, and I'm editing his Books and Beer video later tonight. Awesome. If he sends me, as soon as he sends me the info I asked for. But we were having the conversation about the fact that, you know, he doesn't own his domain, or, you know, he's already bought his domain name that's his name, or would like to, except for the fact that some pair of doctors have already bought his name for their kid that was just born. So this is going to be a tougher and tougher thing to do as more and more people automatically buy the domain name that belongs to the kid that they just popped out.
How many domain names do you own, Jim? Yeah, because I know your number's bigger than mine, and I own probably 25 different domain names.
Oh, that's cute.
Yes. Yeah, because I own every iteration of John Hartness, Bubba the Monster Hunter, Quincy Harker, Falstaff Books, and all of the .net, .com, .orgs that go along with it, plus a few others. And I own and host the domain for a local theater company because they're friends of mine, and I had server space.
Now, I will say one thing to think about there is whatever domain name you set up your email with, you might want to pick one of the shorter ones, or you could always be stuck like me with an extremely long email address that you learn to type quickly from muscle memory, but it's
wasn't going to call you out, but definitely had that thought.
So, and here's a trick on that. So before Etsy was built, one of the projects I sort of created because I had friends that were all artists and we were trying to build a marketplace, I built something called the Artist Collective. That's a domain name about 4 miles long. And then when you start adding, you know, people's names at the front of it. So then the other thing I went and bought was the domain name theac.com, which that was actually a valuable one to sell.
I was thinking Atlantic City might lay out some cash for that.
Yeah. But getting theac.com and having that as the short link for everybody's email addresses. And if you went to theac.com, it would carry you to the longer domain name is a way of dealing with that. If you want to have the big long domain name, come up with something that's a short link just to make your life easier for creating emails and for giving out that link on doing interviews.
Yeah, we'll never be able to own falstaff.com because
No.
well, Shakespeare and beer, but we do have falstaffbooks.com. So that one isn't too bad.
All right. If we could go around and let everyone know where to find you on this social media we've been talking about. Start with John.
Look over my shoulder. You can find me at the Falstaff Books website. There are links there to our YouTube channel. You can find me very infrequently at johnhartness.com. There's also the Facebook group, John G. Hartness Books. There's a Falstaff Facebook group called the Misfit Toys. So I highly encourage people to join those groups. It's a good way to make sure you're getting notifications, because today, and this is where social media content is never evergreen, today Facebook is driving traffic to groups more than pages. A year ago that wasn't the case. Who knows what it'll be driving traffic to a year from now. But today, join the Misfit Toys, join the John G. Hartness Books Facebook group, and come watch our videos.
All right, Gail.
My website can be reached at gailzmartin.com. My Twitter is at gailzmartin. My Instagram is at Morgan Bryce Author. My Pinterest is GZ Martin, pinterest.com/GZ Martin. My Facebook groups, the Shadow Alliance is our reader group for all of our Gail and Larry books, the epic fantasy, the urban fantasy, the steampunk, the space opera. The Worlds of Morgan Bryce is the Morgan Bryce group for the male paranormal romance. And the Supernatural TFWNC group is my Supernatural fan group that I run.
All right, and Jim.
And so the website-wise, the easiest things to find are jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, booksandbeer.net. Then if you look for me on Facebook, there's the James P. Nettles III, me, which is the one I'm most active on. You can also find Jim Nettles out there. Which I used to keep the author me and the me separate, and I'm just too lazy and it's too much time, and pretty much it just doubled the crowd of people I had to aggravate, so I cut it down. I still show up on the other me some, but that's mainly the one that runs groups and pages. You can find me on Twitter as at James P. Nettles. I go through spurts of loving and hating Twitter. I'm trying going back to one of those spurts of loving Twitter. We'll see how that goes. Instagram is at James P. Nettles. There is also an Author Essentials Twitter group. Our Twitter handle. There's an Author Essentials Instagram account. There's Author Essentials group. There's an Author Essentials page. There's the James P. Nettles page on Facebook. And that's the major ones where I show up on a regular basis. And you can find some others that I show up into and out of periodically, but that's the major one that I'm active on, is mostly Facebook, because that's the easiest place for me to run a lot of the business and conversations and things like that. Oh yeah, and YouTube.
All right. I want to thank everyone. See you guys next time in the panel room.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye, guys.
See y'all next time.
Yep.